American architect Frank Lloyd Wright was born in 1867 and lived until 1959. He designed more than 1,000 buildings. He used a term called organic architecture, meaning that his structures blended into the land. Wright gave this quote about organic architecture. Organic buildings are the strength and lightness of the spider's spinnings. Buildings qualified by light, bred by native character to everyone and married to the ground. He was the first architect to use the term Usonian to describe the new type of free design style of architecture that he envisioned. Usonian is now used to refer to some of the homes that he built, including the Jacobs House. These are small buildings that often fit around a garden and have a great deal of natural features, such as ways to heat, cool, and light naturally. He had a checkered life, married numerous times, and his son and grandson also went on to be architects. Another one of his sons was the inventor of Lincoln Logs. Many other relatives became architects and interior designers as well. Wright liked to use items from the location he was building in to complete his projects. One of his most famous homes, called Falling Water, is built near a waterfall, and he used stones from the area to build his walls, contrasting this with the smooth concrete. This helped to bridge the gap between his structure and the setting. Some of his ideas were advanced for the time. When he built a hotel in Tokyo, he planned to float the structure instead of stiffly anchoring it to the ground. He also decided to split the building into sections that were connected loosely to each other so that the building would not fall apart in an earthquake. His methods were later proved successful, as I will describe later. Even the tall buildings he was able to get to model nature. He managed to use the structure of a tree to model some of these larger buildings. This is now termed core and cantilever construction, where he has a good foundation in a horizontal type branches that spread out from the center support. Ward Willets House was Wright's first true prairie-style house. This house was built in 1901 and was created for Ward Willets in Illinois. This house again was created to fit nicely into the surrounding natural landscape and environment. Wright was especially interested in creating architecture that could make this connection. At the same time, Wright was becoming interested in Japanese architecture. This house was quite interesting because there was a windmill-style scene in it, and there are 4 wings that branch out from the central fireplace. Low roofs were seen throughout most of the house except for a large contrast in the big living room, where large high windows were seen and a terrace presents itself. This house was created more as an entertainment center. Unique to this house, Wright was actually the one to design the interior of the house, including all of the furniture, doors, windows, and even the lighting. This house is also unique in that he used different building materials downstairs compared to the upper portion of the house. Lighting created a special effect where it would appear that the roof was actually hovering over the occupants, with dark shadows created from the unique placement of lighting. Again, the main focus of this house was the rotation around the central fireplace. Open terraces and covered outdoor spaces were also created to again extend the interior to the outdoor natural area as he preferred. Interestingly, Frank Lloyd Wright's structures, particularly his prairie-style forms, share many Japanese architectural similarities. However, this comparison would be adamantly denied by Mr. Wright. He would often angrily respond to the suggestion that he was simply adapting the Japanese style. Having traveled to Japan and found influence from their style, even Mr. Wright could not deny that significant similarities existed. Frank once said, "Japanese art had a great influence on my feeling and thinking." Below are some Japanese buildings with similar features to the prairie houses, with low roofs blending in with the surrounding nature. This is a photo of a traditional Japanese house and shows how the indoor blends with the outdoors, similar to what Wright was doing with his architectural style. Another Japanese house, blending natural light elements of nature into the design. Frank Lloyd Wright was fascinated by the Japanese so much that in 1915 he designed the Imperial Hotel in Tokyo. An earthquake then hit Japan and many buildings were destroyed after this time. The Imperial Hotel was not significantly damaged. After that time he began to receive many inquiries about designing buildings. Next is the Ennis House. This was built for Charles and Mabel Ennis. Mayan temples were his inspiration for this type of house. This was one of his favorite houses. Frank Lloyd Wright used the style of what is termed Mayan Revival architecture. This particular house itself was built from 27,000 blocks, textile blocks, concrete blocks made from decomposed granite that they are extracted from the site. Maya architecture often include pyramids, temples, palaces. The architects of those ancient times used things that were easily available. Mainly limestone and sandstone were available, and they discovered how to use this. Limestone could be used to create mortar, but fire and wood burning was required to make small amounts of limestone. Overall, the effort was enormous. They were able to cut their blocks using crude tools. Carvings were painstakingly decorated into the buildings. Sharp angles were prominent. Frank Lloyd Wright appreciated the Maya architecture, and many of his Maya-inspired houses, built with textile blocks, were designed in California. He had bars inserted to reinforce them. Many times he would use the structure itself to terrace out into the landscape, making it seem to be an actual part of the land. He liked all parts of the building to seem as if they belonged together. A lot of the time, he would even use glass to make it seem as if inside and outside were one. Maya building used stones piled on top of each other. Latticework effect and patterns were created with the stones themselves and outer design work. This is an example of the nunnery complex at Uxmal. The pattern of stones is the same as what Frank Lloyd Wright used in his Ennis house. The openings in the walls are the same simple shape. This temple is a tomb of a Maya ruler. Just like the Ennis house, the structure extends up into the sky, and the opening at the top is the same basic rectangular shape as what Frank Lloyd Wright used. Lastly is the Johnson Administration Building. The Johnson Wax family wanted a building in which their employees would feel happy to work in, where the inside wasn't dark and dull. Frank Lloyd Wright chose a design which opened up a large area with columns which were thin on the bottom and looked like lily pads. The columns were designed contrary to the current building codes, so they had to demonstrate that they could support the required 12 tons of load. In a public demonstration, 60 tons of material were placed upon the column before it finally failed. The building permit was issued after the demonstration. Frank Lloyd Wright used the concept of compression and release of space to make the main room appear larger, so the carport started out with short columns, then opened up into a larger area. Since the building site was within a noisy and ugly industrial park, Frank Lloyd Wright turned the building inwards and removed all clear windows looking to the outside. To compensate for the lack of windows, he designed large skylights created from tubes to draw in natural light from the outside. Even the furniture in the room was designed by Wright, like this desk looking like floating pieces of wood. In 1986, the Institute of Architects College of Fellows polled members and found that the Johnson Wax Building rated as one of the most successful examples of American architecture.